For 2 years after my husband died, I left the porch light on every single night. Not for him. I want to say that plainly at the start because people hear a thing like that and they get a certain look on their face. The soft one. And I did not tell many people for exactly that reason. It was not grief. It was arithmetic. If the light is on, the house looks occupied. If the house looks occupied, nobody tries the door. That is all it was. And if you are a woman of a certain age, living alone at the end of a street in a city where you have no family, you already know the arithmetic I am talking about. And you did it tonight before you got into bed. My name is Margaret. I am 73 years old. Get comfortable and let the lamp go off, because this is a quiet one, and it does not have a villain in it, and nothing terrible happens in it after the first part. And I think that might be exactly what some of you need tonight. I live in Spokane, Washington, in a house my husband and I bought in 1981, when everything in this neighborhood was young, including us. 4 bedrooms, a dining room we used twice a year, a basement with a workbench, and a yard with 2 apple trees that Bill planted the summer our daughter was born, and that produce to this day the worst apples in the Pacific Northwest. Bill was a plumber for 34 years. I was a court reporter for 31. If you do not know what a court reporter does, we're the ones sitting to the side of the judge with a little machine, and we take down every word. Every word. Not a summary, not the good parts, all of it. Exactly as said, including the ums, and including the parts where somebody's voice gives out in the middle of a sentence. It is a strange way to spend a life. I sat 8 feet from the worst day of a great many people's lives, and my job was to have no face at all. No sympathy, no shock, no opinion, just hands. I got good at it. 230 words a minute on a good day. And I want you to hold on to that because it explains a great deal about what happened later in this house. And about why a woman who was very good at being quiet in a room with somebody in pain turned out to be exactly what a particular 29-year-old needed at 11 o'clock at night. Bill had a stroke in the spring, 6 years ago. He lived another 18 months after it, most of that at home, and I did what wives do, which is that I learned an entirely new profession at 67 with no training and no days off. And then in the fall he had another one, and that was that. And there were flowers, and there was a lasagna in my refrigerator from a neighbor for 11 days, and then there was nothing. Here is what nobody tells you about the after part. Everybody is wonderful for 2 weeks. Everybody. The phone rings, people come by, the church calls, the neighbors shovel. And then, quite naturally and with no malice at all, everybody goes back to their own lives. Because they have them. And you are standing in a kitchen at 3 in the afternoon on a Tuesday in a house with 4 bedrooms, and you realize you have not said a word out loud since the day before yesterday, and that if you did say something, the only thing in the house that would hear it is the refrigerator. I want to be careful here. I was not miserable. I was not weeping into the dishes. I made my bed. I did the crossword. I went to the store on Tuesdays and to the library on Fridays. From the outside, I was doing beautifully, and I got told so, often, by people who meant it kindly. But I stopped cooking. That was the first thing to go. There is no sadder engineering problem on this earth than cooking for one. And I gave it up within about 4 months and switched over to toast, cereal, and those little frozen dinners in the black plastic trays. Then I stopped using rooms. That is the part I have never heard anybody describe, so I am going to describe it. A house does not empty out all at once. It closes down a room at a time, like a store going out of business. First the dining room, because who eats in there? Then Bill's workshop in the basement, because what would I be doing down there? Then the second bathroom. Then the guest rooms, which had been our children's rooms, and which I stopped even walking past. By the end of the second year, I lived in 4 places: my bedroom, the kitchen, the chair in the front room, and the path between them. A 4-bedroom house, and I had reduced myself to about 600 square feet of it, and I did not notice it happening any more than you notice your own hair growing. My children are good children. I want that on the record too, since I said there is no villain in this story, and I meant it. Doug is 46 and lives in Denver and works in commercial real estate and calls me every Sunday at 4. Karen is 43, in Portland. 2 teenagers, a job that eats her alive, and she texts me photographs of her dog. And starting about a year after the funeral, both of them began, separately, in that careful voice adult children use, to bring up the house. You know the conversation. Mom, it is a lot of house. Mom, those stairs. Mom, there is a very nice place out by the highway. We could look at brochures. They have activities. They were not wrong. That is the thing that made it so hard to argue with. Doug had run the numbers on the taxes and the roof, and he was right about all of it. And every time they said it, something in my chest went hard and flat, and I would say, I am fine, and change the subject to his kids. Because what I could not explain to either of them was that the house was not the problem. I was not lonely for a smaller house. I was lonely for a person. And there is no listing for that. Now I have to tell you about the garage because that is the part that actually moved me. And I have only told about 4 people this in my life. It was a Thursday in February. There was ice. I went out to the garage to get a bag of birdseed off the shelf, and I turned wrong on the step down, the single concrete step between the laundry room and the garage floor. The step I had gone down maybe 20,000 times since 1981. And I went down. I was not badly hurt. I want to say that right away so nobody lies there worrying. I did not break anything. I hit my hip and my elbow, and I got the wind knocked clean out of me, and I lay on that cold concrete floor next to a bag of birdseed for, I am guessing, somewhere between 20 and 30 minutes. Not because I could not get up. I could have gotten up sooner. I lay there because I was doing arithmetic again. I was working out how long it would have been. If I had actually broken my hip. If I had not been able to move at all. Doug calls on Sundays. It was Thursday. The mail carrier does not look in garages. My neighbor Doris on the left is 83 and does not drive anymore. The gal on the right works swing shift, and I had not spoken to her in a year. 3 days. That was the number I got. 3 days minimum, possibly 4, before one human being on this earth would have wondered where I was. I got up eventually, and I made a cup of tea, and my hands did not shake, and I did not cry. I sat in that chair in the front room until it got dark, and then I got up and turned on the porch light, and I thought, this cannot be the arrangement. That is not a dramatic sentence. It was not a dramatic evening. But that was the night it changed. 2 weeks later, I was at the library on a Friday, which I still did, and there was a bulletin board by the door with flyers on it for Tai Chi and tax help and a lost cat. And there was one, printed at somebody's desk, that said, "Do you have a spare room and a little extra time?" and underneath, something about a home share program. I read it twice, took a photograph of it with my telephone in a way that took me 3 attempts, and then went home and did not call for 9 days. I will tell you why I did not call. Pride, obviously, but also because I genuinely thought it was a program for people who needed it, and I had a paid-off house, and a pension, and a car, and I was not going to take a spot from somebody who was actually struggling. It took me 9 days to work out that a woman who lies on a garage floor doing survival arithmetic is somebody who needs it. The coordinator's name was Elena. She was maybe 35, and she had a folder and a laptop, and she came to my kitchen table on a Wednesday morning, and I made coffee I did not want, and she explained how the thing works. It is not complicated, and more places have it than people know. There are programs like it in most states now, usually run by a nonprofit or a county aging office. It matches somebody with a spare room, usually an older homeowner, with somebody who needs housing, usually somebody working, usually somebody younger. Both sides get screened. Background checks, references, an interview that goes on for an hour and a half. Then, if they find a match they like, both parties sit down together with the coordinator and write an actual agreement. Not a handshake, a document. Rent is usually below market, and sometimes part of it is paid in hours instead of dollars. Shoveling, grocery runs, light bulbs in the high fixtures. Elena asked me questions I had not thought about since the Carter administration. Am I a morning person? Do I mind cooking smells? Do I want somebody I will have dinner with, or somebody I will nod at in the hallway? How do I feel about somebody's boyfriend staying over? What is my honest opinion of a person coming and going at odd hours? I said I was married to a man who got calls at 2 a.m. about other people's water heaters for 34 years. Odd hours do not frighten me. She wrote that down and she smiled at her laptop, and I found out later that the smile was because she already had somebody in her head. The screening took 5 weeks. Then Elena called and said, "I would like you to meet a nurse." Her name was Priya. She was 29 years old. She had grown up in Sacramento. Her parents lived in Fremont, and she was a travel nurse, which is a job I had never heard of before that spring, and which I can now explain to you at some length. A travel nurse takes contracts. 13 weeks at a time, usually. A hospital somewhere in the country is short-staffed on a unit, and they bring in nurses from outside on a temporary basis, and they pay more because of it. So you go. You work 3 or 4 months in a city you have never been to, in a hospital where you do not know a soul, and then the contract ends and you go somewhere else. She had done 7 of them by the time she got to Spokane. Bakersfield, Tucson, 2 in Texas. She was working cardiac telemetry, nights. And here is what I did not understand at first, and what makes me ache a little even now. She was not lonely in the way I was lonely. She was lonely in a completely different direction. She had a mother and a father and 2 sisters and about 900 cousins, and a phone that never stopped buzzing. What she did not have was a place where anybody knew what time she came home. Travel nurses live in extended stay hotels and short-term rentals and rooms above people's garages. She told me she had once spent 11 weeks in a furnished apartment where she never once met a neighbor, and where, on Thanksgiving, she ate hospital cafeteria turkey at 4 a.m. on her break. We met at a coffee place. Elena sat between us like a chaperone at a dance in 1968. Priya was small and tired in a way that I recognized, and she had a laugh that arrived about a half second before you expected it. She asked me good questions. She asked what Bill had been like. Nobody had asked me that in about 8 months. Everybody by then was asking how I was doing, which is a different question and a much worse one. At the end of it, Elena said the thing they always say, which is that we should take a few days. And Priya said, "Well, I do not want to be rude, but I am living in a hotel by the airport where the ice machine is directly on the other side of my wall, so—" And I said, "When would you like to come?" The agreement we signed was 3 pages. She would have the 2 rooms upstairs at the end of the hall, which had been Karen's room and the sewing room, her own bathroom, kitchen shared, rent, which I set at about half of what she had been paying, and in exchange, she would take the trash cans down on Mondays, do a grocery run when I asked, and handle anything higher than my head. There was a page about quiet hours that both of us signed, and neither of us ever looked at again. And there was one line on the 3rd page that Elena adds to all of them. And it is the line that quietly changed my life. And it reads, more or less, like this. Each party agrees to inform the other when they will be away overnight. That is it. That is the whole magic trick. Somebody knows whether you are in the house. She moved in on the 1st of May with 2 suitcases, a rice cooker, and a box of textbooks. And I want to tell you that we became instant friends. And that is not what happened. And I think that is worth saying, because these programs get written up in the newspaper as if it is all pie and giggles from day one. The first 3 weeks were awkward as anything I have ever experienced. I had lived alone for 2 years, and I had developed habits I did not know were habits. I talked to myself, out loud, constantly, which I had no idea about until there was somebody in the house to hear it. I watched the news too loud. I had opinions about the dishwasher. She was quiet and polite, and she practically apologized for existing. She would wait in her room until she heard me leave the kitchen. She bought her own everything, down to a separate bottle of dish soap, which she kept upstairs, and which I found so heartbreaking I nearly said something and did not. We were 2 women being extremely considerate at each other. It was exhausting. What broke it, and I have thought about this a great deal, was garbage night. The 3rd Monday, I came out at dusk to find her wrestling both cans down that driveway, which slopes, in the rain, in scrubs, having come off a 12-hour shift about 40 minutes earlier. And one of them got away from her and went over sideways, and the whole thing came out in the road. She stood there in the rain and said a word I will not repeat. And I laughed. It just came out of me. The first real laugh in that house in about 2 years. And I put my coat on over my nightgown and came down the driveway in my rubber boots, and the 2 of us picked up garbage in the rain in the dark for 10 minutes. And when we came back in, both soaked, she looked at me and said, "You laughed at me." And I said, "I did." And she said, "Thank God. I thought you did not like me." We sat at that kitchen table until 11:40 that night. She told me about the hospital, and about her mother, who wants her married, and about the fact that she had not seen her own bed in 2 years. I told her about Bill, and about the courtroom, and about the thing I had never told anybody, which was the garage floor and the number 3. She did not say, "Oh, Margaret." She did not do the face. She said, "Do you have a personal emergency response button? And are you willing to be honest with me about whether you would actually push it?" Which is the most nurse thing anybody has ever said to me. I said no, and probably not. She said, "That is what I figured." And then she said, "Well, I am here now." That was the beginning of it. Now I want to tell you about the tea, because it is the whole heart of this story, and it took about 6 weeks to invent, and neither of us invented it on purpose. She worked nights, 7 at night to 7:30 in the morning, 3 shifts a week, sometimes 4, which means she came home at 8 in the morning when I was up and moving around, and went to bed while I was doing my day, and got up in the middle of my afternoon. Our schedules crossed twice, early morning and again at about 6:45 in the evening when she was leaving. But on her nights off, she was up until 2 or 3 in the morning, because a body that works nights does not switch back on command. And I have been a poor sleeper since Bill died, which most of you listening tonight will understand entirely. So the first time it happened, I came down at 11 for a glass of water, and there was a light on in the kitchen, and a young woman at my table with a laptop and a highlighter. She was doing coursework. She had enrolled in an online program to become a nurse practitioner. 3 years, part-time, while working, and she was in the 4th semester of it. And she was doing it at my kitchen table at 11 at night, because that is when her brain worked. I said, "Do you want tea?" She said yes. And that became the thing. Not every night, 2 or 3 nights a week for the better part of a year. Me in my robe, her with her books. A pot of tea between us. Not talking much. Sometimes not talking at all for 40 minutes at a stretch. I was very good at that. 31 years of sitting 8 feet from people and having no face at all turns out to be an extremely useful skill in a kitchen at 11 o'clock at night, with somebody who does not want to be asked how they are. Which brings me to the night in October. She came in at 8:15 in the morning, which was normal. But she came in wrong. She did not put her bag down in the usual spot. She got a glass of water and stood at the sink and drank it, looking out the window at those 2 terrible apple trees. And she did not say, "Good morning." I did not ask. That is the single best thing I did in this entire story, and it consisted of doing nothing at all. I got up and I put bread in the toaster. I put butter and the good jam on the table. I poured a cup of tea and set it near her, and then I sat down in my chair with the crossword, and I did not look up. She stood at that sink for about 4 minutes. Then she came over and sat down and ate 2 pieces of toast and said, "We lost a patient last night." I said, She said, "He was 58. He was talking to me at midnight about his daughter's wedding." I said, And she talked for about 20 minutes, and I said almost nothing. And when she was done, she put her plate in the sink and went upstairs and slept until 4 in the afternoon. At dinner that night, she said, "Thank you for not saying anything this morning." I told her the truth. I said, "I sat in a courtroom for 31 years and typed while people fell apart. And the first thing I learned is that everybody in the room wants to say something helpful, and nobody in the world wants to hear it. What people want is for you to stay in the chair." She said, "They should teach that in nursing school." I said, "They should teach it everywhere." The first contract ended in August. I had been dreading it since about June, and I did not say one word about it, because it was not my business, and because she had a career, and this is what her career looks like. She came home one morning in the middle of July and said, "They offered me an extension. 13 more weeks." I said, "Oh, that is nice." And she looked at me with those eyes that see straight through a person and said, "Margaret." And I said, "I would like you to take it." She took it, and then, in the winter, the hospital offered her a staff position, which is a real job with benefits and a schedule and no expiration date on it. and she came and sat down in the front room, in Bill's chair, which by then she had appropriated entirely. And she said, "I want to talk to you about something, and I want you to be honest." She said, "If I take this, I am going to be here at least 2 more years for the program, and I do not want to be somebody's project. So I need you to tell me if this arrangement has run its course." And I said, "Priya, I have not turned the porch light on for 2 months." She said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "It means you get home at 8 in the morning, and I know it. And I know when you are on nights, and I know when you are off. And I have not once in 2 months laid in bed at 11 o'clock, wondering whether this house looks occupied." Then I said, "Take the job." I should tell you about Christmas, because my son came. Doug flew in from Denver with his wife and their 2, and I could see it on his face at the airport, that he had questions. And I could see him counting up how a woman he had been trying to move into an apartment near a highway now had a stranger living in her house. He waited until the second day, and then he got me alone in the kitchen and said, "Mom, what do we actually know about this girl?" Now, I could have gotten angry. 2 years earlier, I would have. But I have watched a great many people in a great many rooms say the wrong thing out of fear. And I could hear the fear in it. So I did not. I opened the drawer and I gave him the agreement, all 3 pages, and the letter from the program with the background check. And I said, "Read it." And I went and set the table. He read it, and what got him was not the background check. On the refrigerator, on a magnet shaped like an apple that Karen made in 1988, there is a card. It has my doctor on it, and my pharmacy, and my blood thinner and the dose, and my daughter's number, and Doug's number. And at the bottom, in Priya's handwriting, it says, "In case of emergency," and then her name and her cell number, and underneath, in parentheses, she has written, "At the hospital most nights, ask for me." He stood there and read that little card for a long time. Then he came into the dining room and did not say a word about the house, or the stairs, or the brochures. And he has not said a word about them since, in a year and a half. On Christmas Eve, Priya cooked. She made a whole spread, 6 or 7 dishes, and she had been on the phone with her mother in Fremont for 2 days getting it right. And my grandchildren, who are 14 and 11, and who eat approximately 9 foods, ate every bit of it. And my son washed the dishes with a travel nurse from Sacramento in my kitchen. And I sat in the front room in my chair and listened to 2 people laughing at something I could not hear, in a room I had stopped going into for 2 years. And I want to tell you that I have had a lot of good evenings in 73 years. And that one is in the top 5. So, here is what happened next. Priya finished the program in May. 3 years, part-time, while working nights, at my kitchen table, and I do not think anybody who has not done it can understand what that costs a person. The ceremony was in a big hall downtown. Her parents flew up from Fremont, and both her sisters came, and there were something like 11 people there for her. And her mother, Sunita, who I had spoken to on the telephone perhaps a dozen times by then, took my hand in that lobby and said, "You are the one who kept the tea going." And then she said, she told us. Every week she told us. I sat in the front row, not because anybody made a fuss about it, because her mother put me there. Priya is a nurse practitioner now. She works days, which has been an enormous adjustment for both of us, and she complains about it constantly. And she still lives at the end of the upstairs hall, and we still have tea, only now it is at 9 in the evening, like normal people. The dining room is open again. We eat in there on Sundays. The workshop in the basement is open again too, because it turns out a nurse practitioner with student loans is extremely motivated to learn how to fix her own car, and Bill's tools were just sitting there. I had a bad stretch last winter, an infection that got into my chest and put me in the hospital for 6 days. And I want you to know that I did not spend 1 hour of those 6 days frightened, because the person who drove me in at 4 in the morning knew every one of my medications by heart and stood at the foot of the bed and made those doctors slow down and explain themselves. Her name is on my refrigerator. My name is on her paperwork at that hospital. Neither of us planned a single bit of this, and the porch light stays off now, most nights, because both of us are in the house. And the one time last month that I went to Portland to see Karen for 4 days, I got a text message at 11 at night that said, "The light is on. The house looks occupied. Go to sleep." I do not know how to end this, except to say the thing I have thought about every day for 2 years. I did not need a smaller house. That was never it. I needed one other person to know whether I was in it. That is all loneliness is at the end of the day. Not sadness. Sadness you can manage. It is the arithmetic. It is lying on a cold floor working out how many days, and it is turning on a light for a burglar who is not coming. And it is a 4-bedroom house that closes down one room at a time until you are living in the hallway of your own life. And the cure for it was not a program or a brochure or an apartment out by the highway. It was a tired 29-year-old with a rice cooker who needed somewhere to put her textbooks. Sleep well tonight. Let your shoulders come down. Picture a kitchen with the light on over the table at 11 at night, and a pot of tea between 2 people who are not talking, and rain on the window, and nobody in that room asking anybody how they are doing. That is a good place to be. Stay there as long as you like. I will see you in the next one. Before you drift off, tell me something in the comments if you feel like it. Would you do it, honestly, at any age? Take a stranger into your house, or move into somebody else's? Or is that a bridge too far for you? And if you live alone tonight, tell me who would notice, and how long it would take them. I ask that gently, and I ask it because I would like some of you to think about it. As always, tell me what state you are listening from, and how old you are. Sleep well. The light is on, and the house looks occupied.